All right. Finally, I saw Kantara. I want to give you my breakdown. I want to give you my thoughts. This is a very, very unique film and deserves some interesting conversation and analysis. I I'm going to try to keep it as short as I can because this is one of those things where you could go down a rabbit hole and you could spend probably a long time discussing this film. It definitely has had a lot of positive reactions. It definitely is also not for everyone. And actually, to be honest, it wasn't made for everyone. So let me get to that just briefly as a caveat. I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce everything right. I'm not sure I understand some of the cultural aspects. I'm not sure that I get everything. I will try to touch on some of that as I go along. If you want to leave me a comment, totally welcome. I understand. Please be generous with me. I mean no foul by getting something wrong. The film is really, really an accomplishment. The lead actor is also the writer and the director. And this was what, $1.5 million budget or something, extremely low budget, a complete miracle that this film is what it is in so many ways. To be perfectly honest, I don't even know what to say in some ways when I think about um, the stunts and stuff that they were able to pull off and things like that, the color palette, things like that. So this is in the southwest side of India. It is a Kannada film. So it's a different type of film than, let's say, Telugu or Tamil, where some of the ones we've been more commonly talking about. And this film has a couple of setups that kind of deal with this hierarchy of sets up like 1847 and jumps to 1970s, where you have this king who is in sort of a conflict with the people in this land, in this territory, this forest, and that there is a worship of their god, their deity. And there is this ritual and agreement of peace and things like that that kind of come along with this. And you have sort of this duality of the god versus one that is very forgiving and calm and a bringer of peace versus the one that is very vicious and brings death. And once you break the pact, death and despair comes and other things don't. So you have all of that that's set up and it's done through the heirs making this agreement. And then we move forward to 1990 where you have the modern time, and the new landlord is a term that comes through on our translation. I don't know if that's the appropriate word, but the person that's, in charge of this area, that kind of thing. And then you also have the other character that's very significant in this would be the forest official, the person that is sort of the liaison of the government trying to change this area from being like the land that they can live on for free versus basically being a reserve or protected area. It's a land rights issue. Now, when the film moves to the current setting, everything centers around Shiva. And he is first introduced and presented in these buffalo races, this Kambala. And it's like this carnival area. And he is doing these stunts, man. This is it. This sequence is crazy. Absolutely insane. Shiva is not necessarily well liked by everybody. He's arrogant. He's drinking. He's smoking, prowling around with his buddies. Likes to have a good time. They break the rules. They hunt where they're not supposed to. He respects his mom. He doesn't really listen to his mom. Anyway, this religious ritual thing that they do, this ceremonial event that is introduced in the earlier films, this performer, this ritual performer who becomes possessed by this god, this Panjuli, is was Shiva's dad. Now, the way that this process worked, this possession worked, was this conflict and this communication. And then they ran out into the woods and said, if they're ever found, then they're just a dude. But if they're never found, they're God, right? So if you find a dude, you're just a dude. So the dad just vanishes. And because of that, because of the violation of the landowner had made, they die vomiting blood. So that kind of hangs out there as this premise that we come back to with Shiva, because he really doesn't want any part of any of this. it's his cousin that kind of fulfills that role for the village, or these people, and this folklore is sort of hanging out there. But in this time, it's been a while since we've had this happen. That the landlord and the police, they're not ascribing to anything that these villagers believe or want. In fact, they're very disrespectful in many scenes, right? And things are very, very heated. The police officer, the forestry, we would call it like a forestry ranger. That would be the government official in our country, but it's like it's a forest officer. His name is Murali. Based on the credits, I'm not sure I would have known that in the movie, because I'm not sure that everything I pick up on. It ultimately becomes a grievance between he and Shiva, right? They're bumping heads, and Shiva's pushing his buttons, and there's all sorts of craziness, right? And then there's like a love interest. Her name is Leela, and it's okay. It's fine how that plays out a little bit. This lead up, this entire process of how all of this comes, it is a long hour and a half. It is a long process to get to that point. And by our cinema taste, by our film things, this is way too long, way too slow for me. I don't get engaged really with a lot of the folklore and ceremonial stuff. Shiva, he's never really likable or totally unlikable. You just sort of like take him as kind of like the loser guy who's kind of like not wanting to embrace his past, be like his family, not wanting to embrace the responsibilities. He has a passion for Leela, but they don't really get too far into that either. He uses his relationship with the landlord because of this athletic scene that's early on. It builds a relationship with the landlord, and that he helps that process to get her the job she wants. She becomes part of this forestry group, which puts them more conflict. Anyway, things go along, and you have Murali being set up as the villain. But then there's a big twist in the film. So if you don't want spoilers, this is where I'm going to get to, because the last half of the film, this last probably like 40 minutes to an hour is where the bulk of the meat of the story actually manifests itself. So if you don't want any of that, stop listening. Come back. You realize during this conflict with the forest officials that the landlord has been secretly taking advantage of all of the people. And during the process of the paperwork shuffles and filing issues with the court and that kind of thing, that he is actually taking ownership of land. He's been actually like cheating people. They basically have signed over all of their rights to him. He's going to own everything. And the cousin, his name is Guruva. He is the representative of this, this folklore, this god. Landlord doesn't believe in it, and basically kind of like says, you need to kind of basically say, this is what happens. He's going to get the land. And he's like, well, I can't do that. That's not, and so, well, no, you just say it because it's just you, right? Well, no, the God says this. The God is the one that possesses me or whatever. I'm the God. Well, no, but you're really the guy. Anyway, it results where the landlord murders Guruva and leaves him, and that creates the new phase of the conflict. That Guruva is killed. And the landlord is rude and just shows up. There is a great term that is used, and I love this term because it should be used in other films for this, that he was a symbolic monarch. And I don't know if that's translated well, but that's what came across. I wrote it down. That's a great term for this character and what he represents to the film. So anyway, the family goes to see Shiva, talks about him basically doing this ceremony. This is called the Kola, I think is how you would say it. And you have songs. You don't have dancing. You don't really have like dance sequences. You have just musical montage, which I think is fine. It actually went really well, I think, for most of the movie. But once it's revealed, Murali is figuring out something's not quite right. And he realizes that the documents are coming from the landlord and not the people. And then as they start to look through the surveys, he starts realizing that he's stealing it. So now Murali knows. But then the landlord figures out, so he's going to try to figure out how to turn Shiva against Murali because they already have tension. But reality is Shiva and his friend, they go get high, which is a weird scene, by the way. They're literally getting high. And they get ambushed by the landlord's people because they realize that the friend is explaining to Shiva enough information that he knows it's the landlord, not Murali, who's the villain in all this. The fight scene doesn't make a lot of sense if this dude is this high. Like it was weird for me. I don't understand why that was the right creative decision in that scene. But there are a couple of good gags, by the way, about like there goes my workshop as they throw the guy through the wall or whatever. And stuff like that was fun. So when Shiva goes to the landlord, it's about disrespecting him and creating the place for the right type of conflict. But he's feeling the pressure, having hallucinations now of the father and the responsibility of this demagogue and what he needs to do to take on that role. So by then, Murali has shown up and met with the villagers. The landlord knows everybody knows, and he's showing up with basically a whole bunch of men and torches. They're going to burn everything down. And you have this climax where everyone is fighting. Chaos is breaking out. People are getting killed. The landlord murders a kid at one point. Like it gets dark, really dark at one point. And then ultimately Shiva gets killed. Shiva's killed. He's laying there dead. And it seems hopeless. The landlord is talking all sorts of smack. And then finally Shiva just starts transforming and becomes the evil part of the demagogue, the Guliga. And he is a monster and he is there to kill. And the sequence is insane. Picking a dude up and just basically snap and just jump under the building. Again, just the thought about how low budget it is. The dude does his own stunts. He's the director. It is crazy good and crazy interesting. And it ultimately ends with a future sequence of Shiva doing that thing, becoming possessed, and then ultimately vanishing into the forest, proving that he is a god and that Leela was pregnant and there's a son. That's how the story kind of continue. And I'm pretty sure there's already been talks about a sequel because the movie has done so well. So my thoughts, as I said, I'm having a hard time appreciating the movie as much as other people do. I appreciate it for what it is. On a low budget like this, with a writer, director, star, and the stunts, and the amount of extras, and filming on location, and how it was shot, all of that is just truly, it's really, really a feat. It's really amazing. But I can't look past an hour and 40 minutes of not a whole lot happening. And the star sitting around smoking and then suddenly being able to throw down a fight scene and surviving. And there's a lot of clunkiness that I didn't care for as much in this film as I thought I would because of the high praise it had. Because at the end of the day, the story is very, very simplistic, that it's basically a lands right issue, right? It's a battle over this territory and the governance of it. And Murali is being set up as a villain. There's a big twist, and all of that is what's great. But there's a whole bunch of scenes that I don't quite get, like when Shiva's hunting. Sometimes it's like he's in trouble, but he's not in trouble. There's a lot of cussing in this. I don't know if that is is there actual cussing, because they put curse words in our translation, which I thought was very weird, because that is not commonplace in Indian films, or at least the ones I've seen. I'm sure it is. I'm not trying to judge. I'm just trying to say I thought that was weird and odd and kind of out of place. Maybe it's because I know and I can tell that the film is made to really reflect this village with the language and the dialogue they use and the way all of that is done. I love the cast. I think Kishore is a great looking dude. He basically looks like an Indian version of The Rock. Dude looks he looks pretty awesome. I thought he was really good too. If I had to pick one thing I didn't like the landlord twist in a flashback where they Guruva and the whole thing, but then they have this scene where he's explaining it to his disabled son, and it's all like in a flashback instead of just showing it in real time and traumatizing the audience in real time. And the only reason they did it to the son was so they could set up the son being in the final scene. It was really kind of unnecessary, but a really good film. I'm not sure I would rewatch it, but I wouldn't be opposed to rewatching it. I don't appreciate it as much as others. Give credit to them where they do that. They enjoyed it, and I'm not trying to take away from you if you enjoy it. I just try to give you my objective analysis applied to this film. It is a great feat for this creator and this team, what they were able to accomplish, the amount of money they've been able to make, parlay that into something else. I know I've talked about other films and stuff like that that's been this way. Um, yeah, I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts on this. I'm glad that I was able to fit it in and get this done before Christmas. But I can't say that it is top tier. I really wish there was like, I really wish it wouldn't take that much editing. This could have been about an hour and 40 minutes instead of closer to 2 hours and 40 minutes. There's just a lot that we didn't have to have so much of. Like we had a lot of repetition of Shiva just walking around, being incompetent, a lot of just he's in jail. Just a lot of this stuff was drawn out, and there's really not a lot of stuff that was advancing the plot or giving me new things to enjoy or learn about the characters and the story and that kind of thing. So the execution was fantastic. I just wanted to make sure I go back to that and really harp on how much I think they did a great job, especially for what they had to work with. Really, really impressed with that. So anyway, as I said, you tell me what you guys think. I'd love to hear it. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I'm Pops.